Welcome to the Netma Show, where we discuss news and current events and analyze how those things impact your everyday life. My name is Kellen, and this week we're going to talk about sports, something where you can get behind one team and cheer them on to achieve your central goal. And whether that be the Cleveland Browns, LA Lakers, whomever, most of the time you're probably upset. But here's the thing. With sports, we hear tons of happy stories learning about athletes that have worked their entire lives, working their butts off to achieve the fame and fortune that they've always wanted. So for example, recently we learned that Bryce Harper, who now plays for the Philadelphia Phillies, earned a 13-year, $330 million contract, which included another $10.4 million in incentives. That include, $500,000 if he wins the league MVP, or an extra $100,000 if he managed to be the World Series MVP. Yes, there's a lot of money in sports, and oftentimes with that, there comes corruption. Recently, we learned that 3 former Adidas executives were convicted as they attempted to influence high school basketball players to attend particular universities. What they wanted to do was encourage these players to attend universities that were sponsored by Adidas, with the hope of later signing them to Adidas when they became professional athletes. They funneled tens of thousands of dollars to the players and their families to encourage them. This story broke back in 2017, and when that happened, many coaches were alleged to have known what was going on. And in fact, most notably, the University of Louisville's coach, Rick Pitino, was ousted as people alleged that he knew that players were getting paid for this. Now, this isn't necessarily a surprise because we've heard about student athletes getting payments from boosters or alumni because they're on a particular team. But this stems from a systematic issue. The fact that the NCAA mandates that student athletes cannot be paid, simply because they are a student athlete. Now, in my opinion, I think it's completely appropriate to pay these players. And I'm not saying pay them $1 million. I mean, that would create an insane way of trying to sign this player to this school, and it comes down to how much money that school has. No. Instead, I think that there should just be a general NCAA fund where they pay each player, regardless of sport or regardless of school, a flat $100 per week. And I think that's appropriate. That could be similar to them working a part-time job. And this money can be paid for out of a general NCAA fund as they collect billions of dollars from ticket sales and merchandise sales that are generally supported by the sweat equity that these student athletes are putting in. I don't think that, an extra $100 a week is going to negatively impact the sport by, causing even more corruption. This prevents one big school that has rich donors, rich boosters, or alumni from improperly influencing students to attend that particular school. Because now, rather than saying, hey, I can buy you food if you do XYZ, sign this jersey or take this picture with me, now those student athletes can at least have some sort of comfort in knowing that they have some money to take care of themselves. This problem extends a little further, and I think there's a more realistic example that we can examine, and that's with Duke University's 6'7", 284-pound basketball superstar, Zion Williamson. And if you follow sports at all, a couple of weeks ago, he sprained his knee when he took a bad step, and his Nike shoe exploded, sending him down to the basketball floor. Now, luckily, his injury wasn't any worse than what it was, and he is expected to return at a particular point. But had it been worse, he'd be risking his entire professional career. What if he had torn a ligament? He'd be risking the tens of millions of dollars he could earn as a first-round draft pick in the upcoming NBA draft. And on top of that, people are generally speculating that he could sign a $90 to $100 million shoe deal with Nike. Now, after that shoe exploding, I would argue that they probably owe him some money for that, for the injury and for the chaos that's ensuing around him. But now there are lots of sports pundits, fans alike, arguing whether or not he should continue playing. Should he finish out the season at Duke University or sit down and wait until the NBA draft? And that's because players aren't paid. He'd have really no true incentive to play, except for the hope of winning a championship with his team. And I would argue anything less than winning that championship would make that season, the extra time that he put in, a waste. Because his body, his knee, his talent is all an asset that he's using without any cash flow now. It's all deferred compensation. And if anything happens to your asset, your body, that compensation that you were waiting for, that could go away. That's why I think it's entirely fair to pay these players. Especially considering that universities like the University of Louisville and the University of Kansas, they had deals with Adidas, right? That's how this whole thing started. In Duke University, they have a deal with Nike, mandating that their student athletes wear Nike products when they go out and play. Now that in itself, I don't think that's an issue, because it'd be kind of messed up to say, hey, you student athlete that's coming to play here, well, you have to bring your own shoes, for example, especially when you already don't have any money. And then furthermore, if we were to allow students to bring in their own sports apparel, I think we could end up in this situation where, one company is funneling payments to a student and, they're making thousands of dollars on the side, and that just creates a completely different mess. So I think that is appropriate. But in this case, we should definitely consider paying players to root out the ability of these apparel companies, boosters, and alumni from improperly influencing student athletes. So student athletes are empowered to make the best choices for themselves rather than having to make choices based on the rules that the NCAA mandates to them. But those are just my thoughts, and that's all I've got for you this week. So I'd love to hear what you think. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and until next time, peace.